Today we're going to cover one of the groundbreaking papers that was published last year by a few Japanese researchers where they took the biological signals in terms of fMRI, for example, from the brain, and they were able to reconstruct what the individuals in the experimental study were thinking about. In other words, they took the imagery reconstructions that we know we could potentially do in neuroscience from the individuals who were able to look at the images first and reconstructing it to the next level where the individuals did not have to look at the images, but they just had to imagine the images. And these scientists were able to reconstruct the imagination of these individuals just by looking at their fMRI, which is the imaging, one of the imaging techniques we have when we look at the brain signals. And then after that, once we cover the gist of the paper at least, we're going to continue our conversation about the symbiotic intelligence, which is the intelligence connected from between humans and machines, and then talk about how we could potentially do that by utilizing these type of research, scientific research, where we use the biosignals of humans, and we can then connect the humans and the machines together to be able to create a more amplified version of the humanity in the future. And towards the end, we're going to go a little bit further and become a little bit more philosophical, I guess, and more use our imagination a little bit more than just the science. And then we're going to wrap it up. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. A group of Japanese researchers last year were able to demonstrate for the first time the ability to decode purely imagined images from brain activities with high accuracy, extending beyond simple shapes or letters to arbitrarily complex scenes. Their work showed that GenAI assistant is the key to unlocking mental imagery reconstructions. Prior to this particular breakthrough, the field focused largely on reconstructing images seen by the human subjects using fMRI imaging, for example. However, the work of these particular scientists took this research one step further in terms of setting the foundation for later mental imagery decoding. And today we're going to talk about that. What these Japanese scientists did was to extract these mental images from the participants of not only the seen images by the participants with 90% accuracy, but also of completely imagined images at 75% of accuracy, in contrast to prior methods where the decoding only happened on seen images. These particular scientists looked at the imagined things that these participants were imagining, the images that they were imagining, and they decoded those from these brain images. The experimental design relied on fMRI data collected while subject viewed 1,200 diverse images. The research team then decoded approximately 6 million features from the pre-trained neural network for each image and trained these decoders to map the brain signals onto these features. They then use AI diffusion models to iteratively reconstruct images across about 500 different steps. By embedding semantics into the pipeline, the researchers overcame the gap between low-level visual coding and high-level mental imagery. By using generative AI as well as training these neural networks and the models, beyond mere technological achievements, mental imagery reconstruction holds profound implications. In this case, it could enable nonverbal communication methods for locked-in patients, for example. It also provides a tool for clinical research into hallucination, dreams, and illusion by externalizing subjects' content. And it also opens up new frontiers in art therapy, ethics, as well as the visualization mental states that previously was private. Of course, we need to think about this. However, being able to, in this case, reconstruct what the subjects were imagining as an image would be really is a huge step towards our understanding of the electrical signals within the brain, and these type of studies definitely make the case for those amazing ways in which our brain communicates within itself. Reconstructing the mental imagery that, for example, is happening within the brain just through reading an fMRI imagery and or electrical activities of the brain is a huge step for us moving forward towards understanding more and more as to how the brain works. And this particular paper was a huge landmark in that it's showing us with generative methods, generative AI, we can start decoding the inner imagery of the brain, which is with an astonishing fidelity. Yet, we must also proceed, of course, with both wonder as well as caution as the next frontier opens, because it also opens a lot of privacy concerns, ethic concerns, and so forth. When we consider the implications of us being able to reconstruct images that we are imagining within our brain just by reading our fMRI images or EEG images, which is the brain electrical activities, through using generative AI and combining that with all what we know within the neuroscience, and just we're doing this within a lab, the convergence becomes extremely clear. We are in fact building the early architecture of thought-based interfaces. In this particular study, they used fMRI for its precision in decoding deep visual representations within the brain. But the future lies in translating the accuracy in the portable format of EEG, which is the neural signals or brainwaves frequency, that also gives us extreme insight as to how the brain is communicating within itself, within the neurons, with converging of these electrical brain signals within the brain. EEG captures the electrical patterns produced by coordinated neural firing. These patterns may not give us a full definition picture of what a person is imagining, but paired with generative AI models and real-time calibration, they can approximate intent. They can detect whether someone is visualizing a shape, recalling a face, or shifting emotional tones, for example. These subtle variations, once interpreted by adaptive neural network, could become command languages for humanoids or future next generation AI, such as potentially AGI and or ASI systems. In this context, EEG is not just a biosignal, it is actually a syntax. It carries fragment of meaning that, when decoded with generative models, can reveal the user's internal landscape of thinking, imagining, imaging, and so forth. As neural interfaces advance, EEG devices would potentially evolve beyond passively reading the brainwaves frequencies, for example. They'll become interactive, receiving feedback, refining signal to symbol translation, and learning the neural vocabulary of each particular individual as they are thinking. This is especially relevant for the future of humanoid robots, potentially. Most current humanoid systems rely on voice commands, pre-programmed gestures, or limited tactile interactions, for example. But the next leap will potentially involve contextual awareness, reading not just what we say, but what we think, what we feel, and even what we visualize. Imagine a humanoid assistant that can detect the moment we begin imagining a solution to a problem and start supporting that process before we even speak or think or speak about it. Or one that can detect when we are stressed and offer adaptive responses to de-escalate the situation, for example. In this case, EEG is the most accessible pathway we currently have, such that it can be the brain-machine symbiosis and interfaces. Even in its current form, EEG can be used to control, for example, robotic limbs, cursors, drones, musical instruments, and even games. Now imagine combining this control layer with generative AI trained on personalized mental imagery data. Over time, such a system would learn eventually the neural signature of the visual thoughts of the individual, for example, as well as how the brain uniquely represents objects, shapes, as well as motions. It would then be able to reconstruct those thoughts into visible images or actionable codes, much like these Japanese researchers demonstrated. With EEG wearables in this case, which we already have in the market, becoming more discrete and powerful, these possibilities come closer to our daily lives. For example, the earbud EEG from Emotive allows for passive ongoing brain state monitoring while we go about doing what we do in our daily lives. Imagine the potential of future next generation AIs, as in AGI and or ASI, that they do not need to ask how we're feeling. It actually knows who we are, what we feel, and what we're thinking, because it's continuously receiving that data and correlating it with our visualization, our choices, as well as reactions and emotions. So this is no longer a science fiction, in other words. It's just a matter of infrastructure and interpretation, and essentially is just a matter of time. In the future, potentially, these EEG devices could be combined with other biosignals, for example, as we talked in the past, heart rate, and so forth. This model then would not only inform the future of AI, how to interact with the individual, but also allow for a better understanding of the self-awareness, and the machine awareness then would then progress and connect together in real time. And what we are seeing in the beginning of embodied intelligence is that the future of AI systems are not only abstract algorithm anymore, but they are the situated minds embedded in form of feeling, mutual feedback, mutual understanding, as well as internal languages between the two. Humanoids, for example, guided by biosignals, wouldn't just act to the individual itself, but they would adapt to the individual. They would then become extension of the nervous system, a collaboration in thoughts, motions, and feeling between the machines as well as the humans. The book Symbiotic Intelligence laid the philosophical groundwork as well as the technical groundwork for this piece, but now the technology is catching up. AEG, for example, offers an affordable as well as a scalable and ethically, to be honest, manageable first steps to this vision. Unlike, for example, invasive BCIs, where you need to implant these sensors within the brain, which raises a significant privacy as well as medical concerns, these non-invasive EEG devices, such as the earbuds from Emotive, lets users opt into mind-machine interactions on their own terms. The signal then quality may be a little bit noisier. However, at least the individual then is still in control. Hence, they are more an active member within this interaction as opposed to a passive one. From here on forward, the path then leads to an active learning system. EEG guided AGI, for example, potentially could learn the specific neural signatures of the personal concepts, how we think of, for example, the world around us, as well as it can also tune into the responses that we have accordingly. And over time, this could potentially lead to an intimate alignment between humans and machines, as well as the humans and machine intelligence. The machines then do not just respond to humans, but they resonate to humans. And as this loop matures, a new kind of creative cognition then potentially emerges. We may imagine a building and a AGI system that, for example, when we visualize the world around us, it could potentially be also something that feels with us, thinks with us, and essentially becomes an essential part of us. And this pathway of symbiotic intelligence could potentially include predictive modeling. If the future of AI, as in AGI and ASI, potentially can learn the trajectory of the thoughts that we have through, for example, biosignals data, they may begin to anticipate needs before they're even fully formed. They may help the individual complete thoughts, refine ideas, or stabilize emotions even, amplifying the native intelligence without overtaking it. The machines then become a scaffolding for the cognitive potential of the human. And so these developments would potentially point to a future where these AGI and or ASI, as well as humanoid systems, are potentially not replacement for the human intelligence, but an amplification of it. They extend our inner lives into shared adaptive environments that is more intelligent, more amplified, as well as more capable. They make the invisible visible. They help us build not only smarter machines, but deeper connections within ourselves as well as within the world. So, as we consider the implications of mental image reconstructions, we can also see if it has an isolated achievement. It is part of a broader movement toward a symbiosis, as in symbiotic intelligence, a future in which biosignals of humans decoded by increasingly intelligent systems allow us to co-create, co-adapt, and coexist with the machines in ways that honor both our biology as well as our imaginations. And if we are building toward that future, this time we can get a little bit deeper in terms of the architecture, in terms of the world that we are building, both within humanity, within different culture, and within all the differences that us humans have, envisioning a better future for the humanity itself. Okay, that's all I had for today. I know towards the end we went a little bit more philosophical than we are used to on this channel, but sometimes it's fun to get away from being too scientific, I guess, into also thinking about the future more of a philosophical matter, and vision, I guess, establishing the vision of the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.